livingheritagehomeschool.com.
My name's Cory Wing, and I'm a ruling elder from Shearer Presbyterian Church in Mooresville, North Carolina. I'm also under care of the Catawba Valley Presbytery, seeking ordination and licensure as a teaching elder, God willing, sometime around the end of next year. I'm proud to be in the PCA. I plan on spending the rest of my life serving in this denomination. I'm even wearing a bow tie, so you basically know I'm Presbyterian. I also attended the 52nd PCA General Assembly in Chattanooga back in June of this year, and I said immediately after the announcement of the Interim Study Committee on Christian Nationalism that personally I wanted to see a committee as broad and as varied as our own denomination. I had even close friends of mine that disagreed and wanted it to go a different way, but now it's out, and honestly, it's very close to what we got. The PCA's flagship magazine, By Faith Online, released the following story today, and I quote, Kevin DeYoung, moderator of the 52nd General Assembly, has selected the elders to serve on the Interim Study Committee on Christian Nationalism. The committee will consist of 3 teaching elders, 4 ruling elders, and 2 advisory members. The committee members are David Strain, Drew Martin, James Wood, Paul McNulty, Lance Kinsner, Steve Dowling, and Jay Green. Advisory members are Scott Swain and Alan Guelzo. Quote, I truly believe this committee is going to render a profound service to the PCA and the wider church, end quote, DeYoung said. David Strain is a teaching elder and senior pastor of First Presbyterian Church in Jackson, Mississippi. He was ordained to the ministry in the Free Church of Scotland and previously served as pastor in London, England, and Columbus, Mississippi. Drew Martin is a PCA teaching elder and associate professor of systematic theology at Covenant Theological Seminary. He's most recently the author of Grimke on the Christian Life. He previously planted West Charlotte Church at Freedom in Charlotte, North Carolina. James Wood is a PCA teaching elder, serving as associate professor of religion and theology at Redeemer University in Ancaster, Ontario, Canada. He previously worked as an associate editor at First Things Magazine and as a pastor at Grace and Peace Austin, a PCA church in Austin, Texas. Paul McNulty is a PCA ruling elder who recently concluded his tenure as president of Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania. A lawyer by training, he served as chief counsel during the Clinton impeachment, chief prosecutor for the September 11th investigations, and chief operating officer for the U.S. Department of Justice. Lance Kinzer is a ruling elder at Redeemer Presbyterian Church in Overland Park, Kansas. He's a former member of the Kansas State House of Representatives and a member of the Kansas Commission on Judicial Conduct. Steve Dowling is a ruling elder at Covenant Presbyterian Church in Auburn, Alabama. He also served as moderator of the PCA's 51st General Assembly. Jay Green is a professor of history at Covenant College and a ruling elder at St. Elmo Presbyterian Church. His training is in American religious history, and he has developed courses in American urban and immigration history, along with the history of the modern Middle East. Scott Swain is the James Woodrow Hassel Professor of Systematic Theology and president of Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando. He's also a PCA teaching elder. According to DeYoung, quote, Scott has been studying the theological contours of this issue and will make an invaluable contribution, end quote. Alan Guelzo has recently been appointed a professor of humanities at the Hamilton School of Classical and Civic Education at the University of Florida. Previously, he served as the Thomas W. Smith Distinguished Research Scholar and director of the James Madison Program's Initiative on Politics and Statesmanship at Princeton University. Overture 47, which the Assembly approved, gives the study committee instructions to, quote, study the relationship between Christian nationalism, ethno-nationalism, and related teachings. Further, the committee shall advise on whether these teachings and formulations are in conformity with the system of doctrine taught in the Westminster Standards, or where they may diverge from that system of doctrine, end quote. This was the end of the article. It wasn't flashy. It was informative, much like Presbyterians. But make no mistake, this is an impressive list of very accomplished men, and I believe they will take this responsibility very seriously. Now, are there names I would have liked to have seen on the list that aren't? Well, of course, but some of that's just personal preference. and I understand that. Do we have an entire ministry, however, through our mission to North America that acts as a ministry to our government agencies and its employees called Ministry to State? Yes, we actually have that. And would it have perhaps made sense to add a man that currently serves in that capacity, that's seen the inner workings of the government and the personal devotion of the men and women that are working in it? Well, quite possibly, but that didn't happen. And while I think that maybe that would have represented some low-hanging fruit, I don't think it's going to spoil the outcome of the report. So, while there's been a fair amount of chatter today online about this list of men, both from within the PCA's ranks and from many outside our own denomination, quite possibly the best and most succinct response I saw today was from teaching elder and moderator of the 50th PCA General Assembly, Fred Greco, when he said, quote, "The Study Committee on Christian Nationalism has been announced. As expected, Moderator DeYoung has done an excellent job. Now to remind others of the features of Presbyterianism. We do things slowly, not fast. We don't write to shock, but inform. We seek to build up the church, not individual ministries." End quote. Ad interim study committees are nothing new to the PCA. Actually, as Pastor Greco said, it's a feature. We've had many of these over the years, starting all the way back at our first General Assembly in 1973. That first study committee, back in 1973, at the first General Assembly, was on ruling elders administering the sacraments and on the number of offices that we would have as a denomination. It was appointed at the first GA in 73, and it was, again, going to study if ruling and teaching elders share one office or if they are distinct. They reported to the second General Assembly in 1974. Then they continued their study to the third General Assembly and reported in 1975. The second ad interim committee was on the number of offices. It was very related to the first. It continued the investigation into the 2-office versus 3-office view, and it included the role of assistant pastor. That work spanned several years across multiple GA sessions from 74 to 76, and it included exegetical examinations. Ad interim committee on abortion was done at the 6th General Assembly in 1977 in response to overtures that were to issue biblical statements on abortion. We then had an ad interim committee on questions relating to the validity of certain baptisms. That was appointed at the 15th General Assembly in 1987. They were appointed to examine whether certain baptisms were valid under PCA polity. And it produced a majority and a minority report. Now, that's kind of inside baseball, but that means most people went this way, but there was a pretty distinct minority that was large enough to get their own report. Those decisions were left to lower courts, and the committee was discharged. After that, there was an ad interim committee on paedo communion. That's communion for covenant children. It was formed in the mid-'80s to study whether the PCA should permit such things as paedo communion, and based on the committee study, the Assembly reaffirmed that the communion should only be served to those of years and ability to examine themselves. At the 34th General Assembly in 2006, the PCA overwhelmingly approved the creation of an ad interim committee to study the soteriology of the Federal Vision, New Perspective, and the Auburn Avenue theologies. Those were causing confusion within our denomination at the time. The committee's mandate included determining whether these viewpoints conformed with the Westminster Standards, or whether they were hostile to, quote, the vitals of religion, end quote. They issued declarations based on the PCA's confessional standards. We also had an ad interim committee on insider movements in Islam and Bible translation. That was initiated at the 39th General Assembly in 2011, and it was to study theological and translation issues surrounding Muslim background believers that remain in Muslim communities. The ad interim committee on racial reconciliation and ethnic diversity was approved at the 46th General Assembly in 2018 and was extended to 2019 at the 47th General Assembly. That final report was delivered in 2019, and the findings produced a 66-page report incorporating Lifeway research, theological affirmations and denials, pastoral and missional guidance, and 4 General Assembly adopted recommendations for denominational action and follow-up. We then had an ad interim committee on domestic abuse and sexual assault. That was commissioned at the 47th General Assembly in 2019. It was to produce pastoral resources and best practices, and a bibliography to aid churches, sessions, and presbyteries. We also had the ad interim committee on human sexuality, formed also at the 47th General Assembly in 2019. That was chaired by Dr. Brian Chappell, and members included Dr. Kevin DeYoung and Dr. Tim Keller, and others. It was tasked to study homosexuality, transgender issues, and a lot of related questions. It prepared a report for the 48th General Assembly in 2020, but actually was presented in 2021 due to a COVID delay. And finally, here we are at the Ad Interim Committee on Christian Nationalism, approved by the 52nd General Assembly here in June of 2025. So, this is featuristic of who we are in the PCA. We study. We deliberate. So in summary, the list of men released today is somewhat representative of a few divergent views on church and state relations, and of course the topic of Christian nationalism. But most of these men will fall somewhere in the middle ground. That, by definition, is very PCA. We're never the first denomination to cross the proverbial Rubicon, but we're also never the last. As I just said, we breathe, we wait, we consider, we deliberate. Well, we act like Presbyterians. Erudite, not highly emotional. Now, this will inevitably frustrate some of our members, and of course, many onlookers. But we've been here before, and we're not easily cowed by spectators. So while we all await the eventual outcome of this ad interim committee on Christian nationalism, we will simply keep promoting solid, reformed doctrine, the regulative principle of worship, the common means of grace, and a robust covenantalism, of which, hopefully, the men even all the way back at the 1973 General Assembly would be proud. So until next time, I'm Cory Wing, and remember to always be brave, be bold, and be civically minded. God bless.
Seated here at my right hand, the Lord to my Lord did command.